Right, we're good to go. Well, welcome, folks. Future Work Scotland. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host for this evening, Sathpal, Singh of Goldsmith Sath. I'm joined by my co-host, Donald Henderson. Nicola is not with us this evening. So not good to see you, lots of familiar faces. Thanks for joining. If this is your first time with us, very, very warm welcome to you. If you've been with us before, a lot of familiar faces, warm welcome back. Just the usual formalities. As I said, we do record the session. We do have a code of conduct. Ensure that we ask that you're respectful to one another. We want everyone to have a great experience. And we'll do the usual sort of community shout-outs and give you a look forward to what's coming up. We've got a packed June for you. So yeah, lots of exciting things in the diary for you all. And yeah, delighted to welcome David Goldsmith this evening. Great to have David on. We've had a few good conversations, great conversations with David. Actually, he's very, very insightful man. He's the president and co-founder of Goldsmith organization based in New York, Hong Kong. As he just said, you would have heard he's worked in nearly 50 different countries, which is quite astonishing. You've probably seen his profile and Meetup. That there's so much there. I could go through it all. He's also the author of this amazing, very thought-provoking, award-winning book. And we're going to be discussing some of the themes in that text this evening. Quite keen to hear more about enterprise thinking and learning triangles. And with that, I'm going to hand over to David. David is on the slides this evening, so yeah, we'll keep it conversation flowing. I think it's going to be great. And yeah, you got any questions, usual, stick them in the chat. I'll ask David. It's a small group, so I'm sure we'll be able to stop and you can unmute yourself and join the conversation. So let's see how we go. David, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm enjoyed being invited. It's nice to hear the people are reading Paid to Think and engaging and using the tools in the book. So today we're going to do a little bit different journey. We're not going to be having slides, a typical. I'm not a big slide person. I think there's a lot more engaging ways to be able to interact with individuals. So let's start with the book Paid to Think, and it does come in paperback. It is a lot smaller in paperback. About 30 years ago, I became very frustrated with all the books that I was reading. I was reading Good to Great. I was reading Tipping Point. I was reading all of these amazing books that everybody said were amazing. And when I was done, I would say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. There was a lot of awareness about the things that could be done, but there was no guide for me to be able to understand how to be able to do my job better. And I've been an entrepreneur. I went to university as pre-med, so it was very heavy in organic chemistry, physics, calculus. And I started my first business while in uni. I was in the Financial Times. I was in the Japanese version of Entrepreneur, and I was really trying to build. And the challenge was wherever I looked, I found content that didn't give me direction. So I did something for myself as I started to write and analyze what I was doing or what I needed to do to improve my performance as well as the performance of our team. And the challenge was that each time I added to it, it became this thicker and thicker and thicker volume. But I also tested it out with individuals. I would try it with my friends, with other colleagues. I would try it in different companies to see if this information was valuable. And each time I said something, people said, well, I didn't know how to do that, or I've never seen it that way. I also, through the course of one of the businesses I've owned, and I've owned about, I think it's over 20 now, but one of the earlier businesses, I would do interviews of executives around the world to find out what they were working on, nothing public, but as part of helping them or part of the work that I was doing. And I did, by the time I wrote Paid to Think, approximately 1,800 interviews. And these interviews, the average lasted about 42 to 47 minutes, in that range. I don't remember the exact number, but they would go as long as 3 hours. And they weren't set up as an interview. It was asking questions, trying to find out what their challenges were and how that I can help them. And one of the things, or there's a few things that really rose to the top. The first is it didn't matter if you were profit, nonprofit, government, military, education. Everybody had the exact same challenges. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if you were frontline or CEO. It didn't matter if you were in HR, in finance, in operations. It didn't matter what country an individual was from. It didn't matter almost any variable. They were the exact same challenges, which was surprising to me because when I looked at my university setting, undergraduate was all sciences. I ended up starting an MBA program. I ended up quitting. I found it to be not valuable at all. I told the dean why. And then years later, I went back and completed it in a whole long story that I'm not going to get into. But what I did discover is it doesn't matter what role you're in. It doesn't matter position. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. There were 4 core things that every person in a decision-making role was engaged in. Now, that was kind of surprising to me, that I could talk to a person, for example, who was in the military, and we'd have this conversation. He'd say, yeah, we're working on this new weapon. Well, that was new product development. When I was talking to a nonprofit, they were trying to raise money. Well, that's sales. It didn't matter what type of what country they were in. They were still doing the exact same thing. And it came down to everybody here, if you're a decision maker, you're engaged in 4 core categories of activities. One of them is you're strategizing, you're planning, you're thinking. The next one is you're performing, you're engaged in learning, and you're forecasting. So I'd like to try this for all of you out there. You can be your own judge. You don't have to raise your hand. It's not going to be that type of questioning. If you're in a decision-making role, whether it's a small amount of decision-making or the decisions of everything that you do, I'd like you to say to yourself, yeah, I do that. And see if you don't engaged in these 4, but there are 12 underneath them, 12 activities that you're engaged in. So let's start with the first one. It's not the first one, but it's one I start with. It's called strategizing. Are you involved in creating plans? Now, plans could be as small as getting a team to a certain place. It could be figuring out how to get an activity done, or it could be for your whole organization. Are you involved in creating new products and services? And a new product is often deceiving, because if you're in the accounting department and you come up with a different way to lay out your balance sheet, income statement, to show your information for the company, and you deliver that, that's a new product for your department. If you put on a conference, that's a product. So there's internal products and external products. Yet you're probably in some way, shape, or form creating a proposal for somebody. That's a product. Are you engaged in establishing alliances? Now, an alliance could be the person next to you. It could be for an organization-wide. But we're always involved in establishing alliances. And the last one in that category, are you leveraging technology? And leveraging could putting in a new server. It could be getting a new laptop. We confuse technology with the fact that it's digital or it's complicated. A pen is technology. And we're always involved in that. Now, the next category that I'm going to go over is very simple. Again, ask the questions. The active is, I'll go over learning. Are you involved in acquiring new knowledge? So sitting on this call today is acquiring new knowledge. There's different depths. You can get a master's degree. You could be traveling. You could be talking to people. Are you involved in being more globally aware? Now, there was this one situation where this one individual said, I don't need to deal with being globally aware. I said, where do you work? They said, well, New York City. I said, there's 90 different languages spoken there. Globally aware could mean learning about someone else's religion, learning about their background, learning about the way they grew up. Being globally aware is just understanding the people around you. And the last one in the category is, are you watching competition? Now, competition is not always external. It could be the job that you're trying to go after. It could be going after a vendor that you're trying to position yourself for. So are you paying attention to that? And I can almost guarantee you, if you're in a decision-making role, so far you've said, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. Next category is performing. And in performing, there is leading the charge. So do you actually go out and lead? We confuse leadership with going out and leading, but leading is planning. Leading is creating new products and services. Leading is becoming globally aware. Are you involved in empowering others, having them accomplish a task, giving them opportunities to build and grow? That is empowering. What about innovating, or we call it innovating everywhere? And if you're in a decision-making role, you're constantly innovating. You're looking at, are we doing our things right in all departments? It could be as small as let's say you're an orchestra conductor. You're leading an orchestra, but you hear that the cello doesn't sound exactly right. Now, this is a high-performing cellist. Do you walk up and say, nah, you're terrible, you can't do that? Or do you say, could you move your elbow a centimeter to the left? And they move it and say, wow. And the whole musical orchestra sounds better. So you're innovating by the way in which you look at the world. And this one, next one in this category is interesting. Are you selling continuously? When a salesperson has a product, let's say they're selling a mobile phone, they sell a mobile phone that gets turned down. But the executive who has to sell, you sell up, you sell down, you sell sideways, you sell to vendors, to media, you sell to your friends, you sell to your family. You're constantly selling yourself in the leadership position. And we're never taught leadership selling. And it is the quintessential, it is the ultimate selling person. You sell all day long, including the clothing you're wearing, the type of camera you have, the background behind you. I've gotten more comments about my background. People have, wow, well, I just wanted artwork. And my wife said, take that piece that's up on the top. It's about 4 meters up. She said, why don't you just put that in your room just for me to see? And this I'll talk about later, is we're designing plans to live on the moon. Long story. But I put this behind me, this one for me to see and this one for me to use. And it ended up being a talking piece. I don't use VR. I don't use any AR. I don't put anything behind me, but that's selling because I have a conversation piece. And the last one is the category of forecasting. Are you forecasting? Truth is, you forecast all the time. You forecast what the weather would be tomorrow and how would you get to your next location. You forecast the changes of currency. You're forecasting what you anticipate in HR needs or tools, vendors that you might need in the future. You might forecast simple things such as the tools you need to purchase so that next week you're capable of doing the projects that you're in. I can guarantee you, for every single person on this phone call, if you're in a decision-making role, there's not one category in there you're not addressing every day. And the challenge is that's not what we're taught. And I was surprised. I started writing the book again for me, and I was surprised at all the things that I discovered that I was not being taught or did not learn about or did not read about in a way that allowed me to do that. And so this tool, and I've given already your organization, I've given them 2 chapters of our book, or 3 chapters, or 2.5 chapters, something like that. So you can actually see the graphics. And I'm not trying to sell you the book. You can go online. All the graphics are for free at 1000 DPI at paidtothink.com. So you can download them and use them as you like. The reason I did that is because people were trying to duplicate them and they were doing a horrible job. So you can go there and you can get any graphic you want, not trying to sell a thing, just to make it easier for you to be able to use them. The challenge is now you have a new awareness about this amazing, I think it's an amazing tool, is that we now know that if we focused on these 12 activities, if we focused on these 4 categories, you can improve your performance every single day. If you don't see that these are the 12 that operate, or this is your actual operating system, then you're going to be missing something. And what's even more valuable when you finally see the diagram is that there is a cyclone in the middle, a twister, a typhoon, however you want to say it, is that if you improve one, you improve the others. They all interconnect. If you're a better planner, you're going to be much better selling. If you learn to sell better, you're probably going to be spending or understanding more about forecasting. If you learn to forecast better, you'll know where to spend your time on where you need to find new knowledge. And they all are levers. And as one individual from a major company, can't mention the name, he got the book, he's read it in about 3 weeks. And he called me up. He says, David, the minute I opened it, I knew I could have a 300% improvement on my performance. These tools were designed not for you, they were designed for me. And I found that I could do less work and get more accomplished. Now, when I was first asked to speak on this, one of the topics that came up, it's the first time I've ever been asked to introduce this topic, is the topic of, there's a category in there called learning triangles. And a little backstory, I taught at NYU for 12 years, and we had amazing classes. I had 309 students over 12 years, and I taught 2 core courses. And we would sit during our lunch period or during our breaks, and the team helped create this as a class. When we think about learning, the majority of us think that if we're learning information like you are now, you believe that you're getting the knowledge that you need to be able to make change. And I would argue that most of the things that we do, we have no knowledge. We have awareness. And what I've just shared with you, the ET, enterprise thinking concepts, are basically awareness. You have no idea how to use them. You don't have any depth, but you're now aware that there's a new tool that would possibly be able to help you. The new knowledge, or this 5 learning triangles, are a means by which to look at the world in a way so that you could start to say, where do you want to spend time and energy? So if you consider, there are 5 triangles that are in different shapes. And again, we didn't talk about having a PowerPoint. So I think I could possibly share my screen. Let me try that. Can you give me the rights to share the screen? Let me see if I can get this screen up.
Fine. Yeah, you'll be able to share your screen.
Let me see if I can get this up. Yes, I can. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. It's coming through.
Coming through? Okay. I have them in front of me. I didn't even think of doing that. I'm so used to not using props as a means of explaining things. Here are the 5 learning triangles. The first one is the time spent. We spent the majority of our lives in this condition of awareness. We spend a tremendous amount of time, and the majority of people are being aware. We understand what the weather might be like outside. We're aware of our physical condition. We're aware of our organization. We don't have depth. But in order to create depth, or in this case, time spent, there are very few people who have true knowledge of any category. Now, let's take 7.5 billion people on this world, and we think most of us are aware, but there are very few who know about nanotechnology. There are very few who know about rocketry and sending rockets up into space relative to the population. Now, the second triangle is this thing, effort needed. And the effort needed to become knowledgeable is substantially greater than the starting point. So one example that I've offered in the past, I had opened up this document, read this paper, and it was about Pirelli. And Pirelli tires had done an amazing thing. They had decided, instead of creating a manufacturing facility in a certain location, they created these 2, think of as trailers side by side, and they put automated roboticized technology in to create tires, so that you could do as minimum of 72 tires of a certain design at a time. So an individual would come in, press a button, and the raw materials were right there, and a tire would be created and then spit off the end, and you didn't have a lot of inventory, you just met your needs. And I thought that was an amazing technology. And then I realized I knew nothing about it. I didn't know if it actually worked. I didn't know if the production speeds. I didn't know if the tire lasted as long. I didn't know how they build it. Maybe that little section, that tire manufacturing plant, had actually taken them 7 years to develop and 36 different iterations before they got it to this point. And then they scrapped it because they didn't have a market for it. So I needed a lot more effort to actually understand what that effort needed, or that knowledge would be to be able to implement it, use it, be concise, or leverage it. The next one is a number of individuals. And if you look at it, most individuals, there's a lot of individuals in the category of being aware, but very few who have knowledge. So in this one case, I remember in terms of a knowledge case situation, I was working with a very large healthcare company, and we had 50 executives in the room, and they all tended to be older. So I asked the question, how many of them are new to the organization less than 2 years? And not a single person sitting at the executive table was less than 2 years old in the company. And then I said, let me ask a different question. What was the last book that you read in the past 2 years that you finished from beginning to end? And there were only 2 people in a room of 50 people who had finished a book in the last 2 years. So I said to them, not only do you not have new blood, new ideas, nothing being thrown in, tossed in for ideation, you're also not learning from the outside. And so there were a large number of individuals who were very aware of what was going on, but there was no knowledge being created. Now, the next triangle was integration necessary. Now, again, we're all very much aware of everything, but in order to be integrated, to be knowledgeable, you have to put a lot more energy into it. So the one analogy to think about is this. We all read articles, we all read newspaper clippings, or we all read internet postings. Most of that is just awareness. I can almost guarantee you right now that there's not a single person who can answer this question. What were the last 5 articles you read? And can you name 3 points on any of those articles? Odds are most people can't, because I've done it before. But if I said to you, what was the last book you read? And can you name 3, 4, 5 points out of that, the last 2 books, you'd remember that. And the reasoning is very simple, is that when you read an article, you tend to be passing by. Let me see if there's something in here that I can use, I become aware of. But when you read a book, you are engaged for a period of time, and you're typically asked, or you mentally start to engage yourself in connecting the thoughts and ideas with your life, with your family, with your friends, with your travels, with your experiences, with your goals, your dreams, your aspirations, your organization. And that becomes fixated in your mind. And that difference is where we need to spend more time digging deeper so that we create knowledge for ourselves. And the last one is this category of usable information. Most information is non-usable. Most of the things we learn about, when you think of the volume of information we get, and I want to dig a little deeper, you have all the senses, and I think there's 17 or 18 senses. We think of touch, smell, taste, but there's also we have inside of us a gyration to keep us straight. We have temperature gauges. We have different types of gauges for our body to be able to function. And you take all of them, all that sensory data from seeing. I mean, you think right now you're looking at your screen, but you're seeing everything around your screen. You see everything around you. You turn your head, you're looking at a doorknob. Does that doorknob have any value? But it helps you right now to orient yourself to the room. With all that information, very, very little of it is usable. So the challenge is, how do you identify what those are? Do you spend the time identifying what you need in a better sense that you can create true knowledge? And in the book, and again, I hate to use those terms because I try never to sell when I'm on stage. If you want to use those terms, I'm really here to help. You've got some of the information that I've already offered to you in here. What I try to do is give you a different perception of what would be of value. So I'll give you a story that we started off don't actually remember which chapter it was. I think it was in the competitive situation chapter. Oh, the global chapter. an individual showed up, owned a roofing company, and he was going to do a job for this one individual. And the woman said, I don't want to use this country's roofing materials. I want to use another country's roofing materials. This person said, I don't use anybody's but my country's materials. And she said, so you only use products made from this country? Yeah, I want to stick to our country. So she walks over to his vehicle, opens the car door, and right in there it said, made in another country. And she said, oh, so this car didn't even come from your country. And he was willing to try these shingles. And he said they were far better than anything he's ever used before. He had limited himself to knowledge. He had been doing it for 30 years. He thought he was brilliant at it, and he was a good roofer. He had a nice sized crew, but he was not aware of how limiting his perception of awareness and knowledge were, and it hindered them. So in the cases of every one of you, including myself, I am constantly trying to dig deeper and deeper and deeper to find what I don't know, so that I can find what I do need to know, so that I can dig deeper and be knowledgeable in it. I don't know if that was helpful. So I'll turn this off on this. So any questions on what I've said so far?
I've got one general one for you, David.
Okay.
So obviously we've spoken before, and you're listening to you now, you're clearly a very, very curious individual.
Yes.
So has that always been the case, or was it something specifically that suddenly piqued your interest, and it was from that moment you suddenly became this clearly very curious individual?
I would say that I was, excuse me, I've always been a curious person. However, different circumstances have forced me to be more curious than others. And I'll give you an example. I was approximately 16 years old, and I was on a debate team. Now, this is going to not surprise anybody. I am 57 years old, so this is quite some time ago. And the debate, there were two of us on one side and two on another, and it was in America. And the debate was pro-guns or anti-guns. I mean, this is how long this has been going on in the United States. And my partner owned guns. My partner's father owned guns. And so he gave me some data. I didn't know anything about guns. It was something that our family spent time on. And he set me up to fail. He wanted to look good. That's a nice partner. And the class laughed at me. And from that point on, I've always been very careful of the information that I get from people, so much so that those 1,800 interviews, now it's close to 3,000, those interviews were because I was never going to show up unprepared again. I was so embarrassed. I actually said I would never speak in front of an audience again. I was devastated, and I didn't care about the guys for all the ladies there. It was about the girls in the class, and they were laughing at me. And what happened was, several years later, my partner and I started in uni. We started our first business. My partner received the first degree in the United States ever for entrepreneurism. And he got a call to speak at an event. This is an event that's been going on for decades, and he accepted. And the day before the event, I get a phone call. Where's your partner? He's supposed to show up. I said, what is he supposed to speak on? And they said, such and such. I said, oh, he was probably blowing you off. He didn't plan on going. So I said, out of respect for them and respect for our company's name and brand, I said, I will be there tomorrow. So I drove through the night. I spent the whole night working on it, drove through the night, showed up at the event, and I spoke for 3 hours on marketing and management for a 10-day conference. And I ended up, there's not a pat on the back, it's just I was scared to death. I was the second highest rated speaker out of those 10 days. And I ended up speaking for the American Management Association for 20 years because of that one day. But I was put in a position that I really had an ethical or a moral or an internal thing that I had to do it. And that's how I got back on stage again. But I said I would never, ever, 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 ever speak in front of people. So my curiosity in this realm that we're talking about came about because of fear. I mean, I didn't want to embarrass myself ever again. And so it doesn't matter what organization. I reread my own book just so that I could do this again. And I spent 12 years to write the book, 14 complete revisions, 52 countries mentioned in the book. Nothing made it in the book that didn't work in the real world first. We launched it on Hong Kong so that it was not an American book, but a global book. I lived in Hong Kong for 10 years, as some of you heard. COVID and the challenges with Hong Kong led me, my things are just being shipped back after 18 months. They've been in storage. I wrote the book because of fear. Did I answer the question?
No, it's fascinating, actually. Craig says in the chat that's a fantastic turnaround. He's obviously talking about you for not being prepared, doing the talk and building on that. But no, it's always interesting to hear.
Well, here's something
that's a learning opportunity as well. Right?
Well, here's something that might be useful to everybody, and I hope it is, because it's something that I've lived by. I don't learn to learn. I learn to teach. So no matter what I get taught, I am learning to teach it at the exact same time. Now, I didn't realize this, but I like to help people. So that was how I could help people. But you add a secondary level onto your learning experience when you're learning to already be able to teach it. So if you thought about right now you've been learning for yourself, but if you said to yourself, I have to learn to teach my child or my friend or my coworker what you learned today, you would come at this in a whole different angle. You'd all be doing something differently. And I'll give you an example, just came to mind as I've done this. I've completed about 250 podcasts. I started in the 2000s doing a podcast series where we had people, some of you are old enough to know a guy by the name of Tom Peters in Search of Excellence, the 1 Minute Manager, Ken Blanchard, Jay Abraham. There's a bunch of names that I could list that were very well known. And I did these interviews and I've continued to do them. We have 2 series right now. And when I do an interview, I don't do audio. I only do audio, no video. Because I think when you're on video, there's a few things that happen. People talk to the camera, so they're actually seeing themselves. They assume that people understand things a little bit more than they do. And I think there's a perception of trying to be visually appealing to the audience. I would say, and this is gender related, that I believe women are more conscious than men are when they're presenting about their looks. And that's not why I want someone on the line. I want them because of their intelligence. So what I do before I start any interview is I start off with a piece of paper. This is one for an interview that's coming up. So it's the name of the interview, it's the person, and I do no research. But when I'm done with an interview, and you probably have never seen, these are my notes. I take notes during every single podcast, between 10 to 20 pages of notes. So I'm in the moment learning. I'm taking, I mean, this is a package. This is not just one page. This is a package of information. And it's not like I'm huge, writing big childlike letters, but that's what I'm doing. So I'm taking the information so that I can learn something. But then I also have a tool to teach somebody. I don't have to go back to it. I often do diagrams and notes so that it's leverageable. Well, you know this is nothing new to anybody on the call. If you use multiple senses to be able to learn something, then you're more likely to have learned something. So I'm doing a few things. I ask a ton of questions during the interviews, a ton. So much so that I've even had interviews start, and within less than 3 to 5 minutes, I'm already asking questions because they weren't clear. They would start off and they would say, well, we're doing this. And I'd say, I don't even know what that is. Can you tell me? I interrupt them, and that's part of the interview process because I'm learning. I mean, I have a note here. I don't understand why you told me this. So I don't understand that word, and you never defined it. But most interviews are passive. I'm just listening. So I take the notes and I use them, and that curiosity enables more curiosity and more information and more value. But if you look at those 5 triangles I showed you, what I'm doing is I'm taking an awareness and I'm spending the time in the right areas. Fewer people are going to go as in depth. I'm getting more usable information because I'm asking serious questions. The effort is very high because I'm taking notes and I'm recording in term, not recording as a digital technology. I'm recording it as myself, and I'm integrating it because I'm asking questions that would help my future. Does that make sense?
I liked your comment about the podcast interview, because I've actually just recently had that very experience. So I did 2 recently. One was audio, loved it, great conversation. I knew the hosts. And then I did another one where it was video, and everything you described, that's pretty much what I did. It felt very different. And I struggled a bit more with the conversation because I was too conscious, because and I didn't really know the person who was interviewing me that well.
There's a guy by the name of Alan Rise. I did an interview with him he's out of South Africa, friend of mine. He owns equity in 500 businesses, and he's done tons of podcasts. Our podcast process is very, 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 very different. It's challenging. I've turned down about 300 people, but we create a topic. That topic takes about an hour to an hour and a half to come up with. Hour to 3 hours to come up with. So that's the one line. So Mariba Jah wanted to do on space debris. I don't want to do a space debris, but we did space environmentalism. So I'm changing their topic to something of more value. But Alan Rise agreed to do one. We came up with a topic. It took us about 2 hours to find it. And he got on. He was a little curious. How do you do a podcast without having the video on? And I said, bring your notes, bring everything you need. And we turn off the camera. We say hi, and then we turn it off. He said it was the most enjoyable podcast he had done. He said, you were asking me questions I'd never thought about before. So I was looking out my window and I was taking notes and he said, it was 2.5 hour interview. And he said, I think it was 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 19 minutes or something. He said, I felt like I could be engaged because I wasn't worrying about how I looked and what I was doing and keeping eye contact and doing all those things. But I was also challenging him. I was asking questions he'd never been asked before. Even the topic that came up, and I'll share this very quickly. He said the number one question he's ever always asked is, are entrepreneurs born or made? And I said, I've owned 20 businesses. I really don't care. So we talked and tried to find a topic, couldn't. And finally, I said, look, you own 500 businesses. I've got to believe you think in networks. I got to believe you see things connecting, and you have this net, and every time you bring a company in, they expand and grow. And he says, wait a moment. And he turns his camera around, and along his walls are all network views. He said, how did you know? I said, because it didn't make sense that you wouldn't do it this way. I said, I want you to speak on that. He said, I've never spoken on that. So the good thing was the interview was intense for him because I was really trying to learn, and he had to answer hard questions. And that makes the interview. That makes it exciting. It makes it interesting. But that's the curiosity in me. And I think it comes through. And even Paid to Think, one question I was asked very early on was, David, how did you come up with all these examples? There are 400 examples in the book. And I said, I didn't come up with 400 examples. Well, then how did you do it? I said, I collected 400 examples. I lead my life. These 72% of the stories in the book are my stories. I don't write it that way. So I collected them. So as I come up with an example, I put it in the book. I put it on a piece of paper. I put it on an outline. I put it on an outline. Next thing you know, you've got 700 stories. And then you can go back and start to pick. Instead of finding something, you're now reliving something and making sure that it fits. And it becomes an amazing experience because you now have a history. Does that make sense?
I've got lots of questions for you.
Sure,
but
ask away.
I don't want to monopolize because I like the audience to get the opportunity to ask you.
Does anybody have a question?
Anybody have a question for David? Go on, we've got 40 minutes for our usual close up. There's lots of good stuff we can cover.
I don't know whether it's
I've done a bit of research in David's work. Oh, Sheila.
I don't know whether it's a question or a comment. I listened to the question about comparing book and an article.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a false comparison.
Okay.
You wanted to know if someone could remember 3 points from an article. An article can be half a page.
Yep.
A book can be a couple hundred, it can be several hundred pages.
Correct.
A book is not current. It's gone through a whole process of development.
Correct.
It's probably gone through a process of editing. Depending on the type of book, it may have taken several years from the time it was written to the time it gets published.
Yeah.
An article is usually about something topical in the moment.
Correct.
Talking about a newspaper article, there may not be 3 points in it to remember. So I think saying I think that's a false comparison.
Well, what if you remember the triangles? All I said was one is awareness and the other one is knowledge. So the article is awareness. You often don't have the meat. So if you want to know more, you have to go look at more. So all we were doing was talking about usable or valuable information or time spent. So I agree with you.
But if you're looking for current information, you're not going to get current information on anything that's a rapidly changing subject from a book. Now, if
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing. All I'm saying, so you're saying exactly what we're talking about. It gives you awareness. So in the article, you tend to get awareness. You might learn a few pieces of information, but 9 times out of 10, it's the type of thing where you say, oh no, that's really cool. And then you do a Google search. Are animals really going extinct? And then you read 5 or 6 others. And then you go to another one and say, oh, there's a book written by somebody who's spent the last 6 years working on this. I'm going to order that book. And then you say, so all I'm saying, so think about the triangles, is that articles are awareness. They tend to just give you a very surface view. They're not going to tell you the 17 ways to produce it. They're not going to tell you the materials and detail of how they work through it. They're not going to give you the full ecosystem and make it happen. So I agree with you. The article gives you topical, gives you awareness, does that.
You're twisting the same argument again, because you're still talking about a single article and giving it a surface view and assuming what will and will not be in the one article. If you're only looking at one brief article on a topic, yeah, all that's going to give you is awareness. If you habitually read several articles on the same subject from different sources with different perspectives, you may get actual knowledge if there was actual factual information in the articles. And that may be much more current than what you get from a book that was published a few years ago.
Absolutely. But what you just shared, which I agree with you, is that you read one article and then you said, but then I read many other articles. So that meant that you had to do more effort, which meant that you needed more integration. You had to do it yourself, which could push you to awareness, but you might not have read an article. You might have read a white paper. You might have read a research paper that's 25 pages or 12 pages long, which is different than an article. And a typical article is between 200 to 700 words. I've written over 500 of them. The editors say, give me one that's 500 words. Give me one that's 700 words. But if you have an article that's 5 pages long or 6 pages long, you're now really talking about a paper. And that would give you more. So yes, you're completely agreeable, but take the one article by itself. It's awareness, and you build multiple awarenesses together and you can create knowledge.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You're putting multiples together. So
yes. I'm saying I was just saying that the comparison that if you've only read an article, you're not going to have any knowledge. If it's one article, probably not, unless it's a fairly in-depth article.
And that's what that says is. It's to get people who I know a lot of individuals who will say to me, oh, I read the paper every day. And I'm very aware, I'm very knowledgeable about what's going on. And it's very easy to see that they're not, because they didn't go deep into any of them to pick up 12 more articles. Now, if they said, I've read 42 articles on the economics of the euro as compared to X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, now you're putting effort in, and now you're getting knowledge because you're integrating. Well, that's hard. That's harder work. And a lot of individuals aren't willing to spend the time. They're just not.
Well, the other thing is, if you're only reading one newspaper, even if you read it cover to cover every day, you're only getting one perspective. If you want to form your own perspective and have actual knowledge and not the spin of somebody else with their own filters on what information is important to impart, then you have to read more than one. You have to get more than one perspective to form your own.
And that's what I was trying to get across with this diagram, because there are a lot of individuals who I believe they stopped learning at 30, but believe they're educating themselves for the rest of their lives, but they're not, because you can see the evolution of change, whether it be technology or economics or finance, or, you could say you continually have to be spending the time. And a lot of individuals out there, and if you consider I'm with decision makers, this book is about people making decisions. If you're not constantly evolving, you can't thrive. So great question and great conversation. I appreciate it. And I hope you could see that I was talking about an article compared to a book. There's something that normally is very different. And that's it. It's not as deep as you were going. So I agree with you.
Yeah, it's just, I took issue with it because it's a false comparison to compare. The weight is not evenly distributed between the two. But if you're talking about a combination of information, you can get it from multiple sources.
Yeah.
You can get us. There's nothing wrong with books. I'm trying to read one right now.
Trying is always a challenge too. They're poorly written. They don't have the information. Books are challenging in their own right.
And you have to set aside the time to read it and not get distracted.
And that's where individuals tend to, in my history, they say, well, that book is going to take me too long, so I'll read 5 articles. But sometimes if you really want to have knowledge, you're going to have to dig deep. You're going to have to dig. So let's hit some of these other questions. Thank you, Sheila. You had some others very quickly that I can.
Some nice questions here. There's one here that I really like, David, that kind of relates to what you were talking about earlier. You were talking about fear. It was fear that kind of motivated you. And Brianna's got this fab question for you. So what is fear causing you to do today? Right, let's make it current. Right, we talked about.
I'm going right to current. Fear does. It's not a fear that is stifling. There is fear that everybody has a fear curve, meaning if you get to the end of the fear curve, you will not move. You're stopped. You're frozen. You're scared to death. Then if you don't have enough fear or impetus, you'll do nothing, because there's just, hey, world doesn't move. These are signals that your body gets. Everybody has a different level of where they're going to react. In my world today, I have a lot of different, let's use them, fears. I have a fear of not doing my job well, which causes me to sometimes overdo things. Our team on our Project Moon Hut Foundation team will say I'm a machine. I just went in to about 85 different images and reformatted the date of each one of them so that they can be found in a certain way. So in a year from now, they can be done right. And I have to talk to the person who keeps posting images in a non-structural format that doesn't give us value. Someone might say, well, David, don't worry about it. Yes, but there's a fear that if we really want to use this data later, it's in an inopportune form. So I'm a very structured person. There's a TED Talk in Luxembourg where I talk about systems and structure, and it's in the book, is I always do year, month, day. So 21/06/02. Tomorrow will be 21/06/03. The reason is it makes all of your files in chronological order because we never remember the name that we named the file. You don't remember it. In 5 years from now, someone says, what was the name of the file? You can't find it. But if you said, yeah, that was about 2 or 3 years ago, you open up the folder, there's 17 documents, you'll say, there it is. This was 5 years ago. So we just created in less than a month about 250 images, but somebody's naming them in so many different ways that there's an M and a C and no date. So fear does that. Fear, I do believe that the connection between artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, 3D printing, sensor tech, climate change, mass extinction, resource depletion, all of these are going to cause huge impact in our lives. I call them, there's actually something called the 6 mega challenges. And the work that we're doing in our foundation comes out of a belief that unless we make some radical changes, but not the way you would think, we're going to be in trouble. And what I mean by not the way you think is normally when you address a challenge like climate change or our oceans being dirty, the first thing you go to is we have to put more people in the ocean, more technology for the ocean. And I don't think that's going to solve it because I know people who are cleaning the oceans. And no matter what they do, you ask them in private, how's it working for you? People have done this for 20 years and they'll say, it's not, we're not winning. If you think about deforestation, satellite imagery last year, 1,740 square kilometers. So think of 740 kilometers of driving, about 5 hours. In 1 month, 740 square kilometers were cut in the rainforest. 3,000 square miles were cut. And the year before, guess where it was before? It was 1,750. We doubled it in 1 year. And there's just a report out that in the rainforest, they've hit last year's numbers already in terms of cutting. So no matter what we're doing in terms of deforestation, it's not working. Even though we're planting billions of trees or millions of trees, China's trying to do a lot, they're the #1 planter of trees. It's still not enough. So I do have an internal clock that says, let's move. And I have a fear of not knowing. So I ask a ton of questions. And the Age of Infinite podcast series is me learning. It's the #1 reason I do a podcast is for me to learn. So I don't show up unprepared. So there's a lot that drives me because of an insecurity of not knowing. Then there was another one on here that I saw. I don't know if I answered your question. There was one
Rihanna. Is that all right?
There was one from black belt Taekwondo. So there's a 4th degree black belt in here, Patrick. Hi, Patrick. I am a first dan, which is 1st degree black belt, and the short story. I had trying to figure out where to come from on this. When I was in school, I was that very tall, thin, skinny kid. So my parents signed me up for Taekwondo. And I didn't tell anybody, and I became pretty good. I became a brown belt. There's different forms for everybody that doesn't know. There's white, yellow, green, purple, brown, black, or white, yellow, green, red, black. There's different sequences of different organizations. And I got to this brown level. And one day, some of my friends knew what I was doing, and they came to a class to see. And my instructor put me in front of the room and had me hit what's called a plastic board. A plastic board means you have to hit it exactly on the seam. Otherwise, it's going to hurt like crazy. So the guy wants to show how powerful I am to all these people, so these kids wouldn't bother me. He takes the board out and I wind up and hit it. And you might be able to see that my knuckle in the middle is pretty big. I smashed my knuckle, but I didn't let anybody know. I actually cracked it. I then broke my leg. I was the coach of the Syracuse University ski team, broke my leg in half. And I met Master Sung Chung, who was the former Korean national champion 3 times in a row. And he had a school in the area and he said, you should come. But my leg was put together wrong. So it actually bends where I couldn't, when I stand up straight, I have an angle under my foot. It comes in at an angle. And he started me from white belt again. And he started me from white belt and had me go all the way back up the rung again. And I learned a lot about my resiliency to continue past diverse hardships. And my life has been, it mirrors what I've been through. My life has been maybe similar to some of you. I've gone up and learned, and then I've crashed. I tend to get to a point and then bam, I fall. I mean, I fall hard. I was $500,000 in debt at one point. So I go up and I fall. Then I go up and I fall. And then I go up and I fall. Now, each time I go higher, but each time I fall harder. So I've had this happen. This is my 5th uptake. And I know that this is the last one. I won't have it happen again, but I hit hard this last time. And so at the same point, I know I have the curiosity. I know I have the desire to learn. I've brought these skills together and I dig my way back up again. So that tenacity that comes with having to overcome a sports related activity, I think the Taekwondo helps to give me that confidence often. Not that I can beat somebody up, because I probably can. I'm about 200. I'm at about 104 kilo, and I'm 188. And you're Scotland, so I'll give you the other one too. I'm 6'2" and about 210 pounds. So I'll give you both, so depending on where you are. So I'm not a small guy, but yet I still have always had that. I don't look like I'm as big as I am. And the Taekwondo has given me a confidence that I can attack an issue, but at the same time, I can overcome obstacles that I wouldn't have probably been able to overcome otherwise. And it's a huge part of not who I am external, but who I am internal. So I don't really talk about it that much, but if one day my kids were red belts, never got their black, but they were red belts, and my instructor did something my wife said shouldn't have done. There were about 75 people in the visiting. He called me out from the stands and said, David's going to break 5 boards with a front punch. Now, remember, my hand. We normally use a foot in Taekwondo, but he had me in my hand. My wife was going to kill him because I used my fingers to type. And so I got up there, no outfit on, and I warmed up. And here's a message that I actually teach when I'm talking to individuals, even about our Project Moonhut Foundation, is if you in martial arts hit a board, you'll break your hand. You actually have to go through the board. Now, when you have boards this thick and you've never done that before, it's even scarier. But I got into position, I wound up, my wife said she saw my nostrils flare. I brought back and bam, and I shattered all 5 boards. And I teach individuals when you're doing planning that if you bring your plan to the end, you don't win. Take your plan all the way through multiple iterations, multiple cycles, several months. So you got the contract. You don't go for the winning the contract. You now figure out everything after it. So when you do hit, that's just a continuation of what you're doing. So we're actually in Project Moonhut Foundation, very quickly, we're designing plans for man to live sustainably on the moon, not self-sustaining, through the accelerated development of an Earth and space-based ecosystem. Then we're going to take those endeavors, that paradigm shifting and those innovations, and turn them back on Earth to improve how we live on Earth for all species, for all 50 million species. Very quickly unpack that. We actually have plans that Lockheed's going to be looking at very quickly, very soon, of what we're going to do on the moon. We are designing plans for how to be able to have happen on Earth, and we're addressing the 6 mega challenges I mentioned earlier, and we're going after all 50 million species on the planet. And when you see the plans, people say, oh my God, it's overkill. And I say, no, because you have to go through it. And so Taekwondo is baked into who I am. Make sense, Patrick?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
What do you take from that, Patrick?
Yeah, I think it resonated with me, what you said about it affects you how you are on the inside, mostly. So yeah, you take that with you, what you learn at Taekwondo, and the life lessons you learn from that. If you're out there on the mat, if you're sparring, you cannot hide. You're out there, you have to do it, you have to spar, you have to bring it all and be there. And that teaches you a lot in life. And you take that with your inner life into whatever you do in life, anything else, into your business, your family, whatever. Yeah.
And that could be a musical
That
instrument.
resonates.
It could be all sorts of things that you have obstacles. So yes, it does. Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Patrick. I'll hit some of these. Someone asked, what book am I reading? I'm going to tell, I am reading a book on, one book on Nike and another book, but it's not the message I like to get across. There's some, if I was to ask you, any of you, and this is a continuum, that here are maps and here are words, and in the center is zero, it's neutral. And I asked you if you were going to get directions, what would you rather have, a map given to you or the words written out? And you could be, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Put yourself where you are. I tend to be more on the maps, maybe a 1 or a 2. I'm very close. I could take both. I don't have a real challenge if you give me one. Some people are pure maps and some people are pure words. But it's not a left brain, right brain, and it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with that. What it is that you have a preference for learning. And if we went through everybody in the room today, I can guarantee you they all have different preferences. And what I say to individuals is if you have a preference for learning, you have to find that style of learning capability that you can digest well. So if you've ever gone into a class and you've walked out and the person said, that was the best I've ever heard. And you say, oh my God, that was terrible. Was that person didn't speak in your language. You couldn't hear it. It didn't resonate with you. So people like to hear in maps and words. So I could tell you a story. I could draw a picture and an image in your head. I can relate things differently. I might say the stars are in a row, the stars are in alignment. By using different words and repeating myself, people get the different messages. I personally, my preference of learning is one-on-one. I would rather spend the time doing one of these and learning from an individual than I would reading the book, because the book doesn't follow my way of thinking the same way I would do a podcast or I do an interview. So in terms of the books, I am reading books, but if you gave me an option of interviewing, oh my God, I'll do an interview all day long, because that's where I could say, I don't get it. I mean, I know that you say it, but I don't get it. And I've worked with the CEO of Maersk. I know that shipping lane doesn't exist. How are you doing that? Well, and there are books out there that I've done interviews with authors. They don't know what they're talking about. They can't do it. I had a guy recently who was supposed to be an expert in mining on the moon. And he was told by several people I had to speak to this guy. I get on the phone with him and he starts telling me how he's going to mine the moon and what he's going to do. Say, first of all, no one's ever been to the moon. And done these things that he's talking about. And he's an expert in it. And something's not making sense. And I said to him, so how do you go from the crusher to the primary and the primary secondary, and how do you do the sorting? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, you have a primary, a secondary, a crusher. That's how it's done. And he said, I don't get it. And I said, I ran a rock quarry. We drummed 22,000 ton of stone a day, had 250 semis and 12 scows to 24 scows going down a river every day with 1,000 ton in it. I know how to do a quarry. How are you doing this? And he said, oh, I don't know anything about that. So here's an expert writing all these articles around the world, being called to speak at major events, and he didn't know how to run a rock quarry. He didn't know what to do. And I said, you know, we don't even know if we can move regolith, which is the dirt, if you want to call it a moon. We don't know if we could use a bulldozer. We've never done that to know if we can push something, because you need mass and it's 1/6 gravity. So if I pick this up on the moon, I wouldn't feel it because it weighs 1/6 of what it weighs. I would be 20 some odd, I'd be less than 20 kilos on the moon. I'd be nothing. So he didn't know the constructs behind it. So I'd rather talk to somebody where I can ask them a question. So that, I don't know if that's useful to somebody. How many file tools? That's how I name my files too. Great, Craig. Fantastic. It's not the US format. It's not the US format. It's David's format. I was tired of looking for folders. So we've owned, with all our companies, they're always the same thing. Every file is always year, month, day. And let's say I get CVs in. I don't put CV at the end and resume on some. Every single one will say CV and the name, CV and the name. There's a structure. So then when I look and I want to sort, or I want to find, or I want to do, it will say year, month, day. And nobody, I mean, that's a more of a computer type technology, but it's 21-06-02, tomorrow 03, tomorrow next day 04. And in 50 years from now, you want to find that file? Guess where it's going to be? It's not going to be key to driving success file name. It will be year, month, day 2021. And I can find it. So that's why.
It's the most useful format.
It is just amazing.
Whereas month, day, year is the most useless format.
It's useless. Yeah, because you can't sort. If you looked at our files where we have, say, 200 files in there, they're all in chronological order. All of them. I could sort them the other way. I could find out by name. I could find out by CV. I could do things. But every time I create a file, I'm thinking about the structure. How will I use that tomorrow? And how will our team do that? That's even more important because remember, I'm learning to teach, I'm building for other people. So I have that on everything and it makes life easy because if you use a CRM application, I don't know if many of you do, or you have and CRM is not just for customer relationship management. Most people think it is. It's not. We've used it since 1986. It's a means of organizing data. But let's say you're using Google or you're using another file and you look up a day of something and you say, oh, I sent that email to Alberto on the 26th of May last year. But you want to find that file. I can go to a file and do 26th of May, or I could do 26, 27, 28. There it is. I don't have to remember the name of it because I don't remember the names of all my files. I mean, I'm 57 years old. I've probably created 200,000 different files, including graphics and design and emails and everything. So let's see. I don't want to sound rude. A joke that's being told in my country is that you pay a consultant and tell you what you already know. And I'm a consultant too. So that's not personal. The reason to tell you this is that when you tell me that decision makers don't strategize, learn, perform for it. This is just a description. What should a leader do with the awareness? What should a consultant do with the support of the leader? So maybe, I'm sorry if it came off that way, it wasn't that. I do probably less than 10% of my work as consulting work. It's other businesses that I've owned. So that's one side, is that when I'm out there, I am in so many executive meetings. I am in so many conditions where I find that there is a lack of the 12 activities being done. I'll give you an example. I was in the executive committee of a company in Asia. We had 10 people on the team, and I was on there for 5 years. And we had 4,000 employees. And one day the CEO says, David, give a talk on innovation. Okay, I'll give a talk on innovation. And as I walk out, I looked at the VP and I said, you know what he's just done. And she said, I don't know why he asked you to do that. So I went home. This goes back to Patrick. I created an 18-month plan and a presentation. So I did both simultaneously. An hour presentation in 18 months. I then went out and interviewed people in the company. And I walked in front of the group the first day and I said, okay, everybody in the room, tell me the number one largest innovation project you've created in the past 2 years and how successful it's been, either economically or for the organization somehow. And we went around the room and no one had a single innovation project that they'd been successful at. I said, well, let me tell you what the team thinks about you. These are their manager, the executive team and their teams and their teams. They don't know how to innovate. They stifle innovation. They don't understand the marketplace, yada, 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 yada. It was a terrible list. And I said, how can you tell people to innovate if you don't know how? So what we're going to do is we're going to do this project where you're going to do an innovation project yourself. It sounds like none of you have done one in a very long time. And you're going to have to you can't assign it to anybody. You can't have anybody work on it. You have to do the job that you think is necessary. Well, they struggled. but we ended up launching, told them we have an 18-month program. We launched 42 successful innovation projects out of that one meeting. 42 successful innovation projects in 18 months because of that one meeting, because they realized that they were not learning and they were not aware and they were not doing the planning that they thought they were. When you read Paid to Think, you will see how in depth you could be without overwhelming yourself, actually doing less work and higher productivity. And I make $1, a US dollar on a book. I don't make any money on a book. So you can buy 50 of them, big deal. That's not my value. It's that I was taught like everybody else. And when I sat down and said, how would I actually do this right? Like the sequencing, it made more sense. And so I do spend the time and build the full plans out. And I do spend the time making sure everything is structured. And I do spend the time learning one-on-one. We're building a software program. And I made all these graphics and then I videotaped them. I recorded them. I took my camera and went over each one of them to describe how the software would work. And people said, why did you spend all that time? It's 40 hours of video. And I said, because then I don't have to repeat it again and everybody could share it. And they said, oh, that's brilliant. I said, no, it's not brilliant. I just don't want to spend all my time repeating the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over again. But that's planning. And they're all online for our team to be able to see and view and work with. And it's practical. So maybe that'll help you in some way. At Craig, I remember hearing people say that we can use 99 end of the file, but yes, there's Y2K and all of that. If you went back to 2000s, it changes some, but I've been using it since 1987. I think I came up with that structure as a means to be able to live my life. I don't remember everything. I don't know about all of you. I don't remember the dates of everything. I don't remember every file I've sent. I don't remember every email and every person I met. So I use CRM and I have today in my system, I can actually tell you right now, in this system, we have 28,243 names. There's 28,243 contacts in our database system. I can tell you the last email my mom sent me. I could tell you the last email my father sent me before he died over a year ago. I could tell you what someone sent me in 1996. Do I need it? Most of it's awareness. But when I do need it, it's there. And that makes a difference, makes life easier. Anybody else have a question? Roddy, Juan, Brianna, Robert?
You so very vocal and inquisitive folk. I think you've stunned everyone into silence. We've got about maybe a little over 5 minutes. I don't know if anybody else got a question. I'd be quite interested to hear your sort of short version of a little bit of kind of future gazing. Where do you think things are going next? Because I know you do a bit of that. What's your view? Where are we headed?
I've done a lot of organizations hire me to forecast, and just give you a tool to start with. All of you forecast, and all of you do a lot of forecasting. For example, I could tell you right now, all of you will do a forecast with me and you'll be right. Today, it is June and it is summer here. In a year from now, what will it be for all of you? You're forecasting. In a year from now, you'll be a year older. A woman's biological cycle, women know them like no tomorrow. Your kids will be a year older. Your organization will be a year older. There's a lot of things that we can predict already. So be careful when someone's forecasting a future. And in this case, I believe, based upon the work that some of it's been put out there, is that we're not entering the roaring 20s, as some people think, post-COVID. But we're actually, I think we've had the past 50 years of more or less peace around the world. I mean, relative. We've had wars, we've had conflicts, we had the Crimea, Ukraine, Crimea is, I think, the Russian version of it. We've had conflicts in the Middle East. We've had conflicts around, but we've not had really serious challenges. We've lived through a pretty much amazing time in tier 4 countries, such as Europe, in the United States, and in places around the world. I believe the next 20 years are going to be severely challenged. I don't think that this nationalism is going to go away. I think that we're going to be challenged with weather conditions that are continue to erode. I think the divisiveness, there are 2,850 billionaires in the world today. That's not including people who own 400 million and 700 million and 900 million. And there's a bigger spread of diversity across the world. I lived in Hong Kong, so we had the wealthiest of wealthiest and people living in chicken cages at the same time. I think our humanity has changed. I think that the individualism around the world with TikTok and Instagram and Facebook have put so much onus on the individual as I succeed, what I will have, what I will be able to perform, what I will do, my family, protect my religion or race or creed or color, whatever you want to categorize. So I don't think we're going to find home for quite some time. So my projection is, and that's one reason I'm doing this, is because I think that we have an opportunity, maybe not an opportunity. I believe that if we don't do something in the next 39 years, that in the next 39 years, there will be a point of no return for a lot of conditions. And I'll give you a simple example. Sea level rise, we hear about a meter. Don't worry about a meter. We hear about the storms. Yeah, they're going to be here, but you have to really use it as an interconnectedness. A 15 cm or 6-inch rise in water around the world will be devastating to the world. And we don't think in that way because we say it's only that much. Let's take a country like Bangladesh. Bangladesh floods every single year. It's 156 million people. And if there's that much more water, it means a few things are happening. And let me jump and I'll come back. In Houston, when they had that terrible storm, I heard a reporter giving me some awareness, and they said, well, if we moved Houston back 100 years ago, it wouldn't have been damaged. And I'm thinking, what is this person talking about? Well, 100 years ago, the water was a foot lower, 30 cm, and the waters were warmer or cooler. So the storm wouldn't have happened. And there's less precipitation in the air. So we go now, 100 years later, we're 30 cm, 1 inch, 1 foot. So if we go back to Bangladesh, a storm that takes out every year a certain amount and rises 15 cm is going to hit more of the country more regularly and have displacement. Indonesia, 17,500 islands. What will that do? The Maldives will be gone. The River Thames, they're already looking at building a larger protection device. Well, the storms will be more frequent. Miami, which is a sand dune, what happens when those people can't live there anymore and the storms get worse and worse and worse? So the challenge becomes we then have political unrest, we have social displacement, we have financial challenges that come along with it. So the challenge is, how do you stop all this? And that's what we're trying to work on in a counterintuitive way. But my forecast is, I think that most people on this call, it might not be luxurious in your home, but you're still living in a tier 4 country. Tier 4 meaning you have most of the things in life, where a tier 1 has nothing. Tier 2, in terms of what we consider to be the extras. Tier 2 has maybe a refrigerator and a bike. Tier 3 would have a sofa and a home and all of those, some of those extras. Tier 4 are what I'm seeing in the backs of all of you. Tier 4 is going to be able to ride this out a lot easier, but it doesn't mean that the rest of the encroachment around the world will come. United States has about 40 years of topsoil left. China has only about 15 to 20 years of topsoil left. Could we fix that? Potentially, but topsoil is disappearing in the world. We overfish our oceans. There are 800,000 Chinese vessels out there. 800,000 just the Chinese. Don't blame the Chinese. I'm just saying that's a population feeding. But we have unsustainable fishing methods. So there's a lot that my forecasts are. I think we're going to continue to ride the way we are. We're going to have a lot of divisiveness and conflict. It's going to get worse. And I believe that in the 10 to 20 year range, we're going to look back and say we had opportunities to make significant change. And the number just came out yesterday, day before. It's believed we'll hit 1.5 degrees C rise in temperature in the next 5 years. At least one of those years will hit a 1.5. And that's where plants and animals don't work. One of our team members in Germany, he says the trees in front of his house are dying at the tips. They're all dying. He says in 20 years, there won't be any trees in front of my home, and there's a forest there now. So we have to, there are things we could do, but it's not what we think. We're not, 60 some odd % of all the products we use have petroleum in it. I mean, makeup, toothpaste. You're going to stop using toothpaste? There's petroleum in there to break down part of the toothpaste. So we have to come up with new solutions, and so that's what we're working on. But it's not going to be an easy road. I think we're going to be challenged in many ways. I don't know. It's not a positive way to end. And I didn't give a lot of details. I do have them. I tried to summarize it into I am concerned, and not as an environmentalist, and not as a person who I eat meat. I'm concerned because I don't think the things that we're working on are going to solve the challenges that we have coming up in front of us. Electricity consumption is going exponential because of Bitcoin. Yeah.
So all the stuff you're talking about, I read David Attenborough's.
How Donald, did you have any question?
No, just enjoyed it, and obviously I'll keep exploring the book more and keep the conversation going with you, David. It's been an interesting evening, so thanking you.
Does anybody else, Roddy, was this good for you? I see you smiling here and there. We're good. Juan, are you doing okay? Brianna, I love that you look at me and then you look away. So maybe there's something really important in front of you. You doing okay?
Yeah, it's just mortifying that I agree with someone, and validation is a little bit concerning.
Well, there is projectmoonhut.org. We haven't put our information up. It's a very counterintuitive approach. I'm not a space person, but we have volunteers helping us around the world in different capacities. Some do very little. Dora in Israel is doing the video editing. In the UK, we have Giovanna, and Giovanna is working on social media pieces. We have a person who does copy, and she's in Vancouver. We have David, who's a cryptocurrency guy, big in all of that. We're creating a DAO. We have a person who works for a major company, can't mention the name of the company, and we're creating a software application where we've got teams of people around the world doing all sorts of things to improve our future. And give me 2 seconds, I'll tell you the counterintuitiveness, and I won't go into the details though. Harrison Ford would go up to a wall, and let's say there was in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there's a lock, and the wall is 2 meters thick. Harrison Ford doesn't chip at the wall. He looks at it and says, I think if I can get 6 keys, 6 marbles or something in here has to be found. If we can find them and put them here, I think we can open that door. So he doesn't solve the door. He goes out and finds the 6 marbles. And magically in everything, he holds the marbles and they float up in the air, and then they go in and door opens. I believe that we have to solve it in a way that's so counterintuitive that it's unbelievable. And I'll give you one example, we'll be done. You go up into space. Again, I'm not a space person. I don't look at the stars. I don't want to live on another planet. You go up into space and you're on an International Space Station, or you're on the moon or someplace in space, and your shirt wears out. What do you do with it? Take it, put it into an airlock, ship it out into space? Of course not. Everybody's saying, no, we reuse it, we repurpose it. We don't do that on Earth, first of all, but let's say we did. You'd use it as a headband. Brianna's probably using, that's probably a piece of clothing that is worn out and she's using it. But you would reuse it, repurpose it. But what if there was a zapper? A zapper takes the shirt, you put it in it, bombards it with molecules, breaks it down, and then you can use the materials that come out into 3D print. And you can 3D print things. Sounds like a great idea. I mean, you break it down, you can do the same thing organics, and you end up. Now, that's kind of like in Star Trek, it was the replicator. If you ever be a Star Trek fan, you have a replicator, same type thing, but you'd reuse it. So imagine if every home, every one of your homes on Earth had one of these zappers, and every apartment complex had zappers, and every office building had zappers. So you had your plastic, and we have a ton of plastic. Keep track of in one day how much plastic you use or how much garbage you make to eat and do your day. And it is enormous. Sometimes it scares the Jesus out of me. And you could stick it in and done. And now you could sell it or reuse it or 3D print it. What happens to plastics? What happens to transportation of garbage? What happens to reusability? We solve the challenges of garbage in our oceans. We solve the challenges of a recyclable system. We're not going to stop eating. I had some cake this morning. I had eggs this morning. I had drinks this morning. I had this, I had that. Add it all up. And when you went to sleep, your house still keeps on operating using coal or energy to be able to operate. So your lights are working and your heating and your air con is on, or we can't stop that in fast enough. But a zapper would change it. So Project Moon Hut is about counterintuitiveness to approaching the challenges we have on Earth to solve tomorrow. And that's what I work on every day with our team.
I think that's a beautiful place to end.
What is a zapper? Who wrote that? Sheila?
I don't know who wrote that.
Did she leave then? She wrote it and left?
Still here.
Still here.
Zapper is something I made up. I call it a zapper and everybody asks me that. I love that question. What is a zapper? It's a device that bombards whatever you have and breaks it up into molecules, and you can use it as reusable 3D printing.
Okay, so it breaks it up, but it doesn't at the atomic level is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So similar to the thing that Isaac Asimov had in some of his early books, but it was nuclear, which now sounds crazy.
On the moon, and again, I've done the research. That's how I've heard this. There's something called helium-3. You might not know about it, but it is a non-radioactive isotope. You can burn it, you can use it. And if you took the shuttle, the American shuttle that went up, and you filled it with helium-3 in the cargo bay and brought it back, you would not have to, it would fuel the entire United States for a year. And the reason we don't have helium-3 on Earth is it breaks up in the atmosphere. It doesn't make it. But on the moon, it's all over the moon. We don't know how much. We don't know how to mine it yet. But imagine if we could bring that back and use that. I think we have to be counterintuitive and faster. And if you go to projectmoonhut.org, which has been on the bottom of your screens the entire time, up in the top right-hand corner, there are 3 videos. There is one that is, I spoke in Macedonia. If you live in Northern Macedonia now, but it's called Macedonia there, so I call it Macedonia. I've worked there a lot. There's one video there. There's another one that I spoke in Luxembourg, and then there's one at the end, which is the Project Moon Hut mission in Lever. And that's what we're working on. And we have volunteers just helping us. We're a 501c3. We're doing all the things, but we have an $8 billion project we've put on the table to change the world.
But when you talk about getting resources from the moon, isn't the cost, the energy cost to get there and back currently prohibitive?
Okay, great question. If you look at it, getting to the moon is the ultimate end goal. It is today. But if it's not your ultimate end goal, then it changes it. So this is the way I see it. This is the way I came up with it 7 years ago, where NASA said no one is coming up with ideas like this. I said, we have to get a box and a roof with a roof on the moon. It's a proof of concept. And the minute we do, we end up changing innovation forever, investment and opportunities that will come out of it. But I'm not interested in the moon. It's that if you look at our lives today, look at our lives in total, you can't live a day in a tier 4 country without the moon. I mean, without space, not a single day. You look at your weather, that's space. Your mouse was a space technology. The elliptical running machines and exercise equipment. If you've ever been on a plane where they have the boots on the side for going in snowy conditions, those boots are space. Air filtration, water filtration, baby food, insulin shots, artificial limbs. The list of innovations that have come out of space-based thinking, not always made it to space, is so large that you can't live a day. I mean, every package you get is gone through GPS. All farming, most farming today has a GPS component to it or a weather component. If you take all the activities that space has alters our lives, it's astronomical. So what our objective is to accelerate the space-based thinking paradigm and using those innovations to solve for space, which end up being dual purpose, and those will solve for Earth. And I say to people who don't believe in it, go do something else, change the world another way. I'm perfectly fine with that. But if you think about it for a moment, all these satellites, all this communication, this Zoom is space. Our lives are inherently space technology oriented. We don't even think about it, which is great. But if we can get more of that thinking, what would the world be like? And that's what we're working on.
David, that was fantastic. This is the first time I've ever let it run over. We pride ourselves on finishing on time. Everybody who joins us knows that. We usually bring it to a close. This has been really thought-provoking and fascinating to listen to you. But I am going to bring it to a close there.
I'm perfectly fine. I just hope I delivered on what you were expecting, and that's my...
No, it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Just wanted to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving your time. It has been fascinating. It's been very thought-provoking, and I'm sure everybody's going to go and follow up on a lot of things you've mentioned and watch back the recording and go
and send out the copy. I did send you the few chapters of the book, right?
We'll share.
Okay, so you all will have that. You've got the graphics online. I'm here for you. There's a Luxembourg presentation, a TED Talk. We'll put in TEDx, David Goldsmith, Luxembourg. Go to that. It'll help you with systems and structure. You've got some tools, some free things. There's a Age of Infinite podcast. There's Redefining Tomorrow podcast. And I'm here to help you.
Fantastic. No, just thanks again. Lovely to have you here. Wonderful to host you. And yeah, I'm unmuted, so you're going to get a round of applause from me. So thanks again. We have overrun, folks. I think just with the usual shout outs, we've got other events this month. There's 5 Wednesdays for us. We've got another couple of events for you. Do check them out on Meetup. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was a fabulous session. Thank you again, David. And I hope we'll see you again. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever you have to be.
Maybe in Scotland one day.
And that would be wonderful. It would be lovely to see you in Scotland someday. And yeah, look after yourselves, and we hope we'll see you again soon. Thank you all.
Everybody be well, be safe, and I look forward to hearing from you in some way, shape, or form, and let's make a difference.
Thanks again, David. Brilliant.
Here's everybody.
Thank you.